Hello, I'm Sarah Fromm. I'm an assistant here at the archives at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. Today I'm going to talk about Elizabeth Case, volunteer extraordinaire, and her impact on our city, Fort Collins. Elizabeth Marion Bradley Case was born on June 24th, 1921. She was born in Brooklyn, Iowa. Her family moved to Littleton, Colorado when she was just 8, and she lived there until she graduated high school and moved to Fort Collins, where she attended Colorado A&M, now CSU, in 1938. She graduated in 1942 with a degree in home economics. While she was at college, she was involved in a number of things, including dramatic and independent students, which is where she met her future husband, and honor societies like Omicron Nu, which is the honor society for home economics. In 1942, Elizabeth and Stuart Case got married in Seattle, Washington, where Stuart was stationed at the time during World War II. Elizabeth and Stuart Case had 4 children: Elizabeth, Lori, Greg, and Gary. In addition to their own 4 children, the Cases hosted, over the years, 18 foreign exchange students, both high school and college students, and the Cases became so close to some of their exchange students that they hosted that when one exchange student had his own family and those children graduated from high school, Elizabeth Case referred to it as her own children graduating from high school. The thing that Elizabeth Case was absolutely known for in Fort Collins, and still is known for, it was her volunteer work. If there was something to volunteer for, there was a chance that she volunteered for it. Everything that I've read about Elizabeth Case tried to list everything that she volunteered for, and could not, and I am no exception here. She did pretty much everything. She volunteered for programs like Meals on Wheels, which she drove for 38 years. She was a local election judge. She was involved in a theatrical society known as Town and Gown, and also Little Theater. If she wasn't involved just generally in a program, there was a fairly good chance she was more involved, like being on the board or being a president of the society. So she was also the president of the Fort Collins Historical Society in the 1980s. She was president at one point of the Pioneer Association. She was also the president of the Mountain Prairie Girl Scout Council, along with, Children's Theater, the CSU Host Family Program, and as I said, so many more things. Elizabeth was recognized for her work during her lifetime. She was given the Pioneer of the Year award by the Pioneer Association. CSU recognized her with the 50-year club recognition. She and Stuart both were on the board of the National Association of Retired Employees, and she was given their Community Service Award in 2004. But the award that was probably the biggest and that she is most recognized for was the Community Builder of the Year Award, which she received in 1964. So in 1964, Elizabeth was given the Community Builder of the Year award. She was the second woman to receive this award. This award was given out by men's service clubs at the time. So it was kind of a big deal, still kind of a big deal, if you ask me. But she was given, the Community Builder of the Year award in recognition for her work in Girl Scouting in Fort Collins especially. Elizabeth and Stuart Case donated documents that they had from their lifetime to the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery and Archives and Collections. And while there's not much personal about it, one of the things that Elizabeth donated was the stuff that she kept in relationship to Girl Scouting. So Elizabeth Case and other women in Fort Collins, like Frances Martinez, worked to bring Girl Scouting to all girls of the communities. And in the 1950s, Ms. Frances Martinez and Elizabeth worked to make sure that the day camps that they ran every summer were available to girls of migrant families. Elizabeth Case started and led for 12 years a Girl Scout troop at Holy Family Catholic Church. Elizabeth really believed that Girl Scouting should be fun, it should be special, and it should be available for everyone within the community, with all the girls within the community. In addition to some of these bigger involvements that Elizabeth was part of, these volunteer works were much bigger things that she was recognized for, such as Girl Scouting and working with the community chest, raising funds for community programs. Elizabeth Case was also very active in just sort of basic civic life. She was an election judge, but she also just wanted to educate people on how to be involved in, the civic life, how to be a member of society. So, one of my favorite examples of that is this letter that I have here. It's a letter to the editor in the newspaper, written just after a school bond failed to pass. And she's telling members of the school board and people who voted for this school bond to take heart. Elections can be difficult. Not everyone knows what's involved in them. And so she educates, everyone in this letter just what it takes to get things up to an election point and how people should vote for it and something they should keep in mind for the future and, of course, vote in the future. Another example of her just being involved in the community and sort of a small way, although maybe not super small, was she and Stuart were on boards for the bicentennial celebrations. They were on a committee known as the Horizon Committee, and it was about getting the neighbors in the city together, getting them to know each other, to host block parties, and to just generally take pride in being part of a community. Another way Elizabeth cared about her community was through a focus on local history. If you couldn't tell by now, through her, donation of work that she and Stuart had done and her involvement in the Historical Society and the Pioneer Association, Elizabeth cared about local history. Now, she did benefit from being around in Fort Collins during a time when Fort Collins history was both being destroyed and people were recognizing that they needed to take better care of it. The picture that I have here is Elizabeth holding a window that was salvaged from the Huddle House when it was destroyed in 1962 to make way for J.C. Penney's. This window is red in a wooden frame, and it's actually something that the collections at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery has now. In addition to donating things like that, Elizabeth also worked on educating people about local history. The report that I have here is a report and a rough draft of the report about the history of how Fort Collins schools got their names. So Fort Collins schools all used to be numbered, and they went through a redistricting in which they got new names about educators who had been popular in the area. I suspect that Elizabeth used this rough draft report and as a basis for talks that she was giving for the Pioneer Association, even as late as 2004. While it's really amazing that Elizabeth was involved in all of these societies and programs, it's actually sort of a challenge from a certain perspective to get to know the real Elizabeth Case. One of the best ways to finally get a hint about who Elizabeth Case is to read or listen to the oral interview that was recorded with her by Robert Copeland in 1980. That's where you really get a sense of her drive, why she felt that she always had to be involved in things, why she had to be a volunteer, and also her sense of humor. I struggled with trying to understand why Elizabeth would be involved in so many things, and reading the oral history helped me understand that a little bit, although in many ways it turns out she was involved because she had to be, because she just was that kind of person who had that kind of energy and needed to be doing something that she did feel made a bit of a difference. When I first started this presentation search and wondering who I was going to be talking about, I really wanted to pick a woman who was known independent of the men in her life, and I'm not entirely sure I actually managed that here with Elizabeth Case. And Elizabeth did marry into the Case family. The Case family was very well known at the time. Her brother-in-law and her sister and his wife ran a lodge up in the Red Feather Lakes area for nearly 40 years. And her husband was, of course, known in town. I don't think it particularly matters that she is known in association with her husband, and I think Elizabeth would be somewhat offended that that's how I started this search, that, a partnership can really make the difference. As an example, she wrote into the newspaper at one point a letter to the editor after they had written a story about someone she knew, and pointed out that they did not talk about this man's wife who helped him run his company and then neglected their partnership. So I feel that it was particularly an intriguing point that I ended up selecting someone who was known as a pair. But her work really did shine through, and she really was known in the long run as, Liz Case, someone people did think of and relied on. My favorite thing that I came to know about Liz Case after all of this is that she was a very, in many ways, ordinary woman. And she did ordinary woman things. She was a mom. She was involved in the PTA. She led Girl Scout troops. At first, because her daughters were involved in Girl Scouts and of the right age, and secondly, because she saw a need in the community and helped to fulfill it. That is what I ended up being drawn to most. It was her ordinariness and how, being an ordinary person, she still managed to make an impact on her community. When Elizabeth died in January 2008, the Coloradoans editorial page published an editorial about her, entitled, City's Present Status. It was a result of past generations. And they were really lamenting the loss of this generation that, did things like fighting for the historic zoning of downtown, and did things like forming the Historical Society. And, Elizabeth was really a part of this, but she was a part of this in her ordinary way and really just wanting to make the world a better place. And it's impressive that an ordinary person living their ordinary life can do that, because sometimes we get so overwhelmed by the fear that we're not going to make an impact that it's hard to remember that that is how most of the world gets made, through ordinary people doing ordinary things. I'm going to leave you with this photo that I have of Liz Case. It's from a 1962 article in the Coloradoan. It's about a play that Elizabeth Case was in called You Can't Take It With You, and I just absolutely adore her facial expression. She did acting from high school all the way through the 60s, and I think it really just shows how much she enjoyed life and wanted to be fun and exciting, and that, what good is life if it isn't fun and exciting?